The wine glass shattered against the polished floor, and every head in the drawing room turned toward the sound. Clara Whitfield did not flinch. Red wine spread across the hem of her pale blue dress and splashed onto the black sleeve of the man standing far too close to her. Gasps fluttered through the room like startled birds, but Clara lifted her chin and met the stranger's cold gray eyes without apology. "You stepped into me," she said calmly. The man looked down at his stained cuff as if the damage offended him more than the accident itself. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the kind of tailored coat that suggested money old enough to be careless. His jaw tightened. "You turned without looking." "I was looking at the Hudson landscape above the mantel," Clara replied, and nodding toward the large painting that hung slightly crooked in its heavy frame. "If you had not been blocking it, the collision would have been avoided." A few nearby guests pretended not to listen. They failed. His eyes shifted briefly to the painting, then back to her. "It is a mediocre imitation." A spark lit behind Clara's calm expression. "It is not an imitation. It was painted by Elias Morton in 1872. The brushstrokes in the sky are heavier than his earlier works because he had injured his wrist that year. The light along the river is deliberate. He wanted the reflection to overpower the horizon." Silence stretched between them. The music from the pianoforte faltered before resuming. Conversation resumed too loudly. The stranger studied her more closely now. You speak with confidence." "I speak with knowledge." He folded his hands behind his back. "You have studied art?" "I have restored it," she corrected. "There is a difference." "And what difference is that?" "Artists create beauty. Restorers save what others neglect." A faint line appeared beside his mouth. Not quite a smile, not quite amusement. "You sound resentful. You sound dismissive." A nearby matron coughed in disapproval. Clara's father had warned her that evening. "Smile. Be gracious. Do not argue with the guests." Ashford Manor was not what it once had been. Repairs were overdue. Bills were unpaid. Tonight's gathering was not merely social. It was necessary. But the stranger's tone, the way he spoke as though everything around him existed for his inspection, stirred something sharp inside her. "You assume much about a house that is not yours," she said. "I observe," he replied evenly. "And what I observe is decay disguised as elegance." The words struck harder than they should have, because they were true. The wallpaper near the ceiling peeled slightly. The carpet beneath their feet had been turned twice to hide wear. The silver was polished, but there were fewer pieces than last winter. "You mistake honesty for insult," Clara said quietly, "and you mistake pride for strength." Heat rose along her neck, but she refused to look away. "You must find these gatherings exhausting," she said, walking into rooms and believing yourself the most intelligent man in them. "And you must find them equally exhausting," he returned, "knowing you are." The remark caught her off guard. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "And you are the only person in this room who has looked at anything real tonight." She should have dismissed him. She should have stepped away. Instead, she found herself asking, "And what are you looking for?" "Truth." "In a ballroom?" "In people." She felt her breath pause. The noise of the room seemed distant now. The chandeliers flickered softly overhead. The scent of perfume and polished wood lingered thick in the air. "You are very direct," he observed. "I prefer not to waste time." "Nor do I." Footsteps approached. "Clara," her father's voice said warmly from behind her. "I see you have met our most distinguished guest." Clara turned slightly, relief and irritation mixing together. "We were discussing the Morton landscape." Her father smiled, though there was tension in his eyes. "Allow me to properly introduce you. His Grace, Duke Nathaniel Hawthorne of Blackridge. The world narrowed. Duke. Her gaze snapped back to the man she had challenged for the last half hour. His expression did not change, but something knowing flickered there. "You are the Duke?" she asked, before she could stop herself. "I am." Her father cleared his throat softly. "His Grace is considering the purchase of neighboring lands, and perhaps more." More. Ashford Manor. Clara's stomach dropped. She had accused him of arrogance. She had mocked his observations. She had argued over paintings like a stubborn child. The Duke inclined his head slightly. "Miss Whitfield has been enlightening." Her father laughed politely. "She can be spirited." "I noticed." Clara forced herself to curtsy properly. "Your Grace." The title felt strange on her tongue. "I find spirited conversation refreshing," he said. Her father gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner is served. Clara, you will sit beside His Grace." Of course she would. As guests began moving toward the long table, Clara's pulse quickened. This was no longer simple irritation. This man had power over her father's future, over their home. They took their seats. Candles flickered between silver dishes. The Duke sat to her right, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You did not change your tone when you learned my title," he murmured quietly. "Should I have?" "Most people do." "I prefer consistency." A servant poured wine. "Are you angry with me?" he asked. "For what specifically?" "For noticing the decay." "You did more than notice." He considered that. "Yes." The first course was served, but Clara forced herself to eat, though she barely tasted the food. "Why are you here, truly?" she asked after a moment. "To evaluate the estate." "For purchase?" "For restoration." Her fork paused. "You would not tear it down?" His gaze softened slightly. "No." A fragile breath escaped her chest before she could stop it. "You care for this house," he said. "It was my mother's favorite place." "And now?" "And now it leaks in the east wing, and the roof tiles shift in winter storms." "And you have restored the paintings yourself." She blinked. "How did you?" "The varnish on the Morton, the delicate cleaning around the riverbank. It is careful work." "You recognize restoration technique?" "I invest in art. It would be unwise not to." Silence settled again, but this time it was not hostile. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Now, if this house were yours to decide, what would you do?" She hesitated. "Sell the lesser pieces," she admitted finally. "Repair the roof properly. Convert the carriage house into a full workshop. Invite scholars. Let the house live instead of pretending it is unchanged." "And why has that not happened?" "Because I am a daughter," she said simply. "Not an owner." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And if you were given authority?" "I would make it thrive." The candlelight reflected in his eyes. Not cold now, thoughtful. "You argue fiercely," he said. "I protect fiercely." "Even against a duke?" "Especially against one." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Good." She stared at him. "Good?" she repeated. "I have no interest in timid people." The other guests laughed loudly at something down the table, but Clara barely heard them. "This evening began poorly," he said. "Yes. And yet I find myself reluctant for it to end." Her pulse stumbled. "That is unfortunate," she replied carefully. "Why?" "Because you are leaving tomorrow." He studied her face, searching. "I may return," he said. "For the estate?" "For the estate," he agreed. Then, after a brief pause, "and perhaps for the restorer who defends it." Her breath caught. Across the table, her father watched them with cautious hope. Clara lowered her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "You should be careful, Your Grace," she said softly. "Of what?" "I do not bend easily." His voice dropped just enough that only she could hear. "I would not want you to." The candles flickered. Outside, wind brushed against the old windows of Ashford Manor. And for the first time that evening, Clara felt something more dangerous than irritation rising in her chest. Clara did not sleep that night. The house had grown quiet hours ago. The last carriage had disappeared down the frozen road. The servants had extinguished the lamps in the hall. Yet her mind refused rest. The Duke of Blackridge was sleeping under the same roof. That thought unsettled her more than she wished to admit. She stood at her bedroom window and looked over the dark fields stretching beyond Ashford Manor. Frost coated the bare trees. When the east wing roof caught the moonlight, and even from here she could see where tiles had shifted. He had noticed it too. Decay disguised as elegance. The words had stung because they were true. But he had also said restoration. He had not spoken like a man, eager to strip the land bare and build something new. He had listened. He had asked questions. He had looked at her as if her answers mattered. That frightened her more than his title. Morning arrived gray and cold. Clara dressed simply, choosing a dark wool gown suited for work rather than social visits. If the Duke expected another performance, he would be disappointed. She was halfway down the staircase when she heard voices in her father's study. "I understand the roof must be addressed first," the Duke was saying. Clara paused. "Yes," her father replied. Though it will require significant expense. I expected as much." She descended the remaining steps and knocked lightly before entering. Her father looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Clara, you're up early." "So are you," she said, her eyes shifting briefly to the Duke. He stood near the window, coat already on, gloves in hand. Even in daylight, his presence felt commanding. Not loud, not aggressive. Simply steady. "Miss Whitfield," he greeted. "Your Grace." Her father cleared his throat. "His Grace has requested a full tour of the property before returning to Boston." Boston? Of course. He was not merely a visiting aristocrat from the old world. He was American wealth, with European title. Industry, wrapped in nobility. "I would prefer to see it through someone who knows it well," the Duke added. Your daughter seems to observe more than most." Her father hesitated only briefly. "Clara knows every corner." "Then she shall guide me," the Duke said. It was not phrased as a command, yet it felt inevitable. They stepped outside into the brittle morning air. The grounds looked smaller in winter. The gardens were trimmed back. The fountain had been drained months ago to prevent freezing cracks. "You care for this place," he said as they walked. "Yes." "Why?" She glanced at him. Must there be a reason beyond affection? Affection rarely survives practicality. It does if one refuses to surrender. He studied her profile but did not argue. They began with the stables. The beams were solid but aging. The fence posts leaned slightly. Clara pointed out where wood rot had begun. He listened. Not politely. Not distracted. It truly listened. "You speak like an architect," he observed. "I speak like someone who cannot bear to see waste. And if the cost outweighs the value? Value is not always measured in profit. Then how is it measured? In history, in memory, in craftsmanship." He nodded slowly. They walked toward the east wing. Inside, dampness lingered in the corridor. Plaster had cracked near the ceiling. "The roof leaks during heavy rain," she said quietly. "We place buckets." "And you endure that? What choice do we have?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, He reached up and pressed gently against the weakened plaster. A small flake fell. "This can be saved," he said at last. Her breath tightened. "You sound certain." "I have rebuilt worse." "You have?" "My family fortune did not begin in drawing rooms, and it began in steel." She looked at him differently then. "You built something yourself." "Yes." "Not inherited. Built." That changed the shape of him in her mind. They moved toward the carriage house. "This is my workshop," she said, pushing open the wide wooden doors. Dust motes floated in pale morning light. Tables were crowded with tools, jars of pigment, half-cleaned frames. He stepped inside slowly, as though entering sacred ground. "You work here alone?" "Yes." He examined a canvas resting against the wall, a river scene mid-restoration. "You cleaned this section," he said, pointing gently without touching. "Yes." "And the original color beneath was brighter." "It always is." He looked at her then, something intense in his gaze. "You could do extraordinary work with proper funding." She stiffened slightly. "I do not require charity." "I did not offer it." "Then what are you offering?" He took a breath. "A position." She blinked. "If I purchase the estate, I will require a resident art consultant and restorer, someone who understands the collection and can expand it wisely." Her heart began to race. "You want to hire me?" "Yes." "As what? A decorative feature for visiting guests?" "As the authority." Silence filled the workshop. "You would grant me full oversight?" she asked carefully. "Under agreed terms. And if I disagree with your choices? Then we will argue." "You enjoy that, do you?" "Only when the opposition is intelligent." She should refuse. It was safer to refuse. Employment from a duke meant dependence, obligation, vulnerability. "And my father?" she asked quietly. "He will retain residence in the West Wing for as long as he wishes." Relief flickered across her face before she could mask it. "You have considered this carefully?" "Yes." "Why?" He stepped closer, though still maintaining respectful distance. "Because last night you defended this house before you knew who I was. Because you care about preservation more than pride. Because I have no interest in purchasing something that will decay again." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "And you trust me?" "I do." "You have known me less than a day." That was enough. The wind rattled the carriage house doors softly. "This arrangement would bind us professionally," she said slowly. "Yes." "And socially?" He held her gaze. "I would never ask you to diminish yourself. That was not my question." He hesitated just long enough to reveal truth. "Socially," he admitted, "it would create conversation." "Scandal," she corrected. "Perhaps." She folded her arms, more to steady herself than from defiance. "I do not want to be someone's project," she said. "You would not be." "I do not want to be admired for novelty." "You would not be." "And I will not soften my opinions to make you comfortable." A faint smile touched his lips. "I would not survive if you did." For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "I would require autonomy." "You shall have it." "In writing." "Of course." "And fair compensation." "Agreed." "And the workshop remains mine." "It remains yours." She exhaled slowly. "Not you negotiate as if expecting betrayal," he observed. "I negotiate as if protecting my life." "Then protect it with me." The word struck deeper than she expected. "With me." Not for me. Not because of me. With me. She looked around the workshop, at the cracked beams, the limited tools, the unfinished canvases waiting patiently for more than she could currently give them. Opportunity stood before her, but so did risk. "If this fails," she said quietly, "I will not be ruined." "You will not be. And if I discover that your interest is temporary?" "It is not. You cannot know that." "I can." "How?" "Because I have never been more certain of anything." Her breath caught. He stepped back then, as though aware he had said too much. "I will have contracts drawn," he said evenly. "You may review them at leisure. And if I decline, then I will still repair the roof." She stared at him. "You would?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it deserves to stand." He placed his gloves back on. "I leave this afternoon," he said. "I will return next week." She nodded, unable to speak. As they walked back toward the manor, the air between them felt changed, less antagonistic, more charged. At the front steps, he paused. "You were right about the Morton landscape," he said quietly. "I usually am." "I know." His carriage waited. Her father stood in the doorway, watching. "Miss Whitfield," the Duke said softly. Yes?" "You spilled wine on me last night." Her stomach tightened. "It was accidental." "I disagree." She frowned. "You wanted my attention." Color rose in her cheeks. "And now you have it." He stepped into the carriage. The wheels began to turn. Clara stood frozen on the steps as it rolled away down the winter road. Her father moved beside her. "Well?" he asked gently. "He offered me a position." Her father's brows lifted. "And I have not accepted." "Do you wish to?" She watched the carriage grow smaller in the distance. "Yes," she whispered. "And do you fear it?" "Yes." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then perhaps it is worth considering." Clara did not answer, but as the wind moved through the bare trees and the old house creaked softly behind her, she felt something shift inside her. And the argument had begun with spilled wine. It had become something far more dangerous and far more real. The Duke returned exactly 1 week later. Clara had told herself she would remain calm, that she would treat his arrival as business, that she would not look for his carriage every time wheels sounded on the road. She failed on all accounts. When the black carriage finally appeared through the iron gates, her heart began beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her father met the Duke in the study. Clara waited in the workshop, pretending to clean a varnish brush that had already been cleaned twice. Footsteps approached. Measured. Certain. He paused at the open doorway of the carriage house. "You did not greet me," he said. "You did not request a greeting." A faint smile touched his mouth. "I brought the contracts." She wiped her hands on her apron and faced him fully. "May I see them?" He stepped inside and laid the documents carefully on her work table. The parchment looked official, sealed properly, detailed. She read slowly. Annual salary. Independent authority over restoration decisions. Budget allocated for materials. Full use of the workshop and expanded renovations at his expense. Her name written clearly. No vague clauses. No hidden language. "You kept every term," she said quietly. "I said I would." "And my father?" "He retains full residence rights." Relief softened her expression. She turned the final page. "And if either party wishes to dissolve the arrangement," she read, "a 6-month notice and fair compensation." "Yes." Silence settled between them. You truly intend this to be professional," she said. "Yes." She looked up sharply. "Only professional?" He held her gaze. "That depends on you." The words hung in the cool air of the workshop. She set the papers down. "You understand what people will say?" "Yes." "They will say I trapped you. They will be wrong. They will say you are indulging in novelty. They will also be wrong. They will say, I do not particularly care what they say. She searched his face for arrogance and found none, only certainty. "And if I care?" she asked quietly. "Then I will stand beside you until you no longer do." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, though still respectful. "I am not offering rescue," he said. "I'm offering partnership. You barely know me. I know enough. You argue with me. I admire that. I am stubborn. I require that." She almost laughed. "And if I fail?" "You will not. You cannot promise that." "No," he admitted softly, "but I can promise I will not let you face it alone." The wind shifted outside, rattling the loose hinge on the side door. Clara looked around her workshop, at the faded beams, at the limited tools, at the canvases waiting for more than she could currently provide. Then she looked at him. "What happens if I say yes?" she asked. "We begin restoring the estate properly. And if I say no? I will still repair the roof." Her lips curved faintly. "You are very stubborn, Your Grace." "So I have been told." She stepped closer now, closing the distance herself. "I do not want to belong to someone's charity." "You would not." "I do not want to become decoration in a larger house." "You would not." "And I will never pretend to be smaller than I am." "I would never ask it." Silence. Her heart pounded. "Why me?" she whispered. He did not hesitate. "Because you challenge me. Because you see truth where others see appearance. Because when you argued with me before knowing my title, I realized I had finally met someone who did not care about it." Her pulse faltered. "And that matters?" "It matters more than anything." She swallowed. "And if this becomes more than employment?" His expression shifted. Not cautious, not playful, serious. "But then it becomes more." "You would risk that?" "Yes. For a woman who spilled wine on you and insulted you for an hour? I have never been more grateful for spilled wine in my life." A breath of laughter escaped her before she could stop it. He stepped even closer. "Clara," he said quietly. The way he spoke her name changed everything. "I am not careless," he continued. "I would not risk my estate or my future on impulse. I have considered this carefully. And I want you beside me." The words landed softly but powerfully. "Professionally," she pressed. "Yes." "And personally?" "Yes." Her heartbeat roared in her ears. "You are asking for two things at once." "I am. That is dangerous." "I know." She studied him, searching for doubt. There was none. "I have lived carefully for years," she said slowly. "I have protected what little we have left. I have made myself smaller in rooms where I should have stood taller." He did not interrupt. "I am tired of living that way." "Then do not," he said. She took a breath. "If I agree, I keep my work, my voice, my independence." "Yes." "If I disagree with you, I say so. I expect it. If I fail, you do not rescue me. You stand with me. I promise." Her chest tightened. "And if this becomes something deeper," she whispered, "you do not hide me." His jaw set firmly. "I would never hide you." The moment stretched. Her whole life seemed balanced on a single breath. Then she reached for the pen on the table. She signed, her name steady, clear. When she set the pen down, the air felt different. He did not touch her immediately. "Welcome to Black Ridge Estate," he said softly, and she met his gaze. "I am not leaving Ashford," she replied. A slow smile formed. "Nor would I ask you to." He extended his hand. She took it. His grip was warm and firm, not possessive. Equal. For a moment they simply stood there, hands joined in the quiet workshop. Then her father appeared in the doorway. "Well?" he asked carefully. Clara turned toward him, her hand still in the Duke's. It is done. Her father's shoulders sagged with visible relief. Then Ashford will stand, he said. Yes, the Duke replied. It will stand. Weeks passed quickly. Repairs began immediately. Workers replaced roof tiles. Plaster was restored. The east wing dried and strengthened. The workshop expanded with new shelving and proper windows for light. Clara oversaw every detail, and the Duke returned often. Too often for it to be only business. One evening, as they reviewed restoration plans in the gallery, she set down her notebook. This is becoming complicated, she said. Yes. You are not subtle. I am not trying to be. She folded her arms. People are noticing. I am aware. And you do not care? I care about you. Her pulse stilled. You are certain of this? I am. She looked at the half-restored Morton landscape behind him. What if this is temporary? It is not. You cannot promise forever. I can promise intention. Silence filled the gallery. Finally, she asked, why did you truly come to Ashford that night? He stepped closer. I had heard the estate was failing. And I wanted to see if it was worth saving. And is it? He looked directly at her. Yes. Her breath caught. You are reckless, she whispered. Perhaps. You are certain? Completely. She took one step toward him. If this is to be more than partnership, she said quietly, it must be honest. It will be. No secrets. None. No regret. None. The distance between them vanished. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. When he finally kissed her, it was steady and certain, as though he had known from the first spilled drop of wine that this would happen. Her hands rose to his coat, gripping tightly. The world outside the gallery faded. When they parted, her breath trembled. This is madness, she said softly. Yes. She searched his eyes. And yet? And yet, I would not change a single moment. A slow smile spread across her face. Then perhaps, she said, arguing with you was the best mistake I ever made. It was not a mistake, he replied. You turned deliberately. She stared at him. You knew? I hoped. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You are impossible. And you are extraordinary. Outside, the repaired roof held firm against the winter wind. Inside, the house felt warmer than it had in years. Clara Whitfield had argued with a rude guest all evening, and by the end of it, she had secured not only the future of her home, but the heart of a duke who had come to judge an estate and stayed because of the woman who refused to bow to him.